They said it was older than the pyramids, older than humanity itself. A stone buried deep under the sands, covered in glowing symbols that no scientist could explain. Every camera failed to capture it. Every person who touched it vanished without a trace. And when one man dared to read its forbidden code aloud, the sky above the desert lit up with something that should not exist. What happened next was so terrifying. The government locked it away forever. But what if I told you it's still there, and the code is not finished yet? Welcome to another untold chapter of history. My name is John, and I'm the voiceover artist for Historia Unseen. Let me take you inside the forbidden ancient code that science fears to read. They said it was older than any empire, older than humanity itself. A black stone buried under the sands, covered in glowing symbols no scientist could explain. Every photograph failed. Every witness swore the symbols moved. And when one man read the code aloud, the sky changed forever. This is not a myth. It's a story hidden in locked archives. A truth that could rewrite the birth of nations that in the dry heat of the Egyptian desert, far from any known city. An old caravan moved slowly under the burning sun. At its head rode Edward Kane, a man whose life was built on finding what others thought impossible. He wasn't chasing gold or treasure, but something older, something the maps didn't show. For months, Kane followed whispers from traders, strange tales told by desert nomads. They spoke of a place where the wind never stopped, and the sand sang at night. They spoke of a black stone, standing alone in a hidden valley, carved with symbols that seemed to glow in the dark. No one dared go near it. Some said it was the birthplace of the first kingdom. Others said it was cursed. When Kane's caravan finally reached the valley, it was silent. No birds, no insects, only the sound of boots pressing into soft sand. In the middle, surrounded by broken pillars and ancient ruins, stood the monolith. It was massive, taller than 3 men, wide as a city gate. Its surface was so smooth it reflected the sunlight like a mirror. But the most shocking thing were the symbols. They were carved deep into the stone, glowing faintly even under the blazing sun. Kane froze, his heart pounding. This was no ordinary artifact. He moved closer, his fingers trembling. The carvings were not like Egyptian hieroglyphs. They weren't Greek or Sumerian. They were something else entirely. Strange shapes, some sharp like blades, others curling like smoke. And at the center, a large golden emblem in the shape of an eye, or perhaps a keyhole. Kane's assistant, a young scholar named May, spoke in a low voice. "Say, I've seen these symbols before, but only once, in an old manuscript from the Library of Alexandria, before it burned." Kane turned sharply, and May hesitated. It spoke of the first great nation, not built by men, but by those who came before. The manuscript warned the code was never to be read. The wind picked up, carrying fine sand across their faces. Somewhere in the ruins, a loose stone fell, echoing like a drumbeat. Kane felt it then, an energy, faint but alive, radiating from the monolith. That night, as the campfire flickered, Kane could not sleep. He kept staring at the stone, its faint glow like a heartbeat in the dark. The desert seemed to hold its breath. May approached quietly. "There's something you should know. My grandfather told me a story of a time before the pharaohs, when the desert was green and the sky was different. The people of that age followed a leader chosen by the stone. It was said whoever read the code would gain the power to unite tribes, to create a nation." Kane's eyes narrowed. "Or destroy one." The next day, they began to study the carvings. But something strange happened. Every drawing they made faded within hours. The ink would run, the paper would blacken. When Kane tried to take a photograph, the image came out as a blur of light. By the 3rd day, the crew was restless. 2 workers refused to go near the monolith. One swore he heard voices in a language he couldn't understand. Another claimed the stone shifted when no one was looking. Kane dismissed them, but deep inside, he knew they weren't lying. On the 5th night, Kane awoke to a strange humming. It was low, almost like the vibration of a ship's engine, but steadier. He stepped outside his tent. The monolith's glow was stronger now, lighting the valley in a soft golden hue. And then he saw her, a woman, standing at the base of the stone, her back to him, her hair long and dark, shimmering under the light. She traced the carvings with her fingers, and the symbols lit up under her touch. Cain called out, but she didn't turn. Instead, she whispered something, and the humming grew louder. When he reached the stone, she was gone. Not a single footprint in the sand. Amay found him at dawn, still staring at the monolith. Cain told him what he saw. Amay's face went pale. So, in the legend, there was a guardian, a spirit who appeared only to those ready to read the code. Cain clenched his fists. Then it's time, we find out what the code says. But neither man knew that reading it would not only reveal the birth of a nation, it would awaken something far older. Morning broke over the valley, but the sunlight felt cold. Cain stood before the monolith, notebook in hand, his eyes fixed on the golden emblem at the top. The glow was faint now, as if the stone had returned to sleep. Amay approached cautiously, carrying a small wooden box. "I brought the rubbing paper and the charcoal," he said. Cain nodded. "Let's try again." They pressed the paper against the carvings, rubbing gently to capture the shapes. But the moment Amay lifted the sheet, the lines twisted. The symbols they had copied just seconds ago rearranged themselves into patterns that looked nothing like the stone. Amay stepped back, his voice trembling. "It changes." Cain narrowed his eyes. "No, it wants to be read by the right person." 4 hours they worked, but every record faded or distorted. Their tools became useless. Even Cain's expensive camera produced nothing but blank glass plates. By midday, the rest of the crew was growing nervous. The cook refused to serve lunch anywhere near the ruins. 2 laborers packed their belongings and left without saying a word. Cain ignored them. He had faced deserts, storms, and curses before, but never a puzzle like this. That night, Cain set a small oil lamp at the base of the stone and began tracing the carvings with his fingers. The stone was warm, almost too warm for the cool desert night. As his fingertips moved along the lines, he noticed something. The symbols were not random. They flowed in a spiral, starting from the base and winding upward, all leading toward the golden emblem. Amay joined him. "It's like a path," he whispered. "A path to what?" Cain asked. They were interrupted by a sudden gust of wind that roared through the valley. The lamp flickered, almost going out. In the darkness between flames, Cain thought he saw movement, shadows sliding across the stone surface. Amay stiffened. "Do you hear that?" Cain listened. It was faint, but there was a sound. Not the wind, not the desert. It was a low, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat, and layered over it, the soft murmur of a voice. They couldn't make out the words, but both knew it was speaking in the same strange language as the carvings. The next morning, Cain decided to bring in help. From Cairo, he requested the presence of Dr. Amelia Ross, a linguist who specialized in dead languages. She arrived 3 days later, tall, confident, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. As soon as she saw the monolith, her steps slowed. "This," she breathed, "is not man-made." Cain smiled. "That's why I called you." Amay explained their failed attempts to record the symbols. Ross listened carefully, then set down her bag and took out a small mirror. She positioned it to reflect the monolith's surface and gasped. "In the mirror, the symbols are different," she whispered. Cain took the mirror. Indeed, the carvings appeared as an entirely new set of shapes, more complex, more alive. The lines seemed to shimmer and shift, as though aware of being watched. Ross turned to Cain, her voice low. "I believe this is a living language." Cain frowned. "Living?" "Yes," Ross said. "It changes, it adapts. It doesn't just hold meaning, it reacts. This is older than Egyptian, older than Sumerian, older than humanity itself." Her words sent a shiver through Amay. What if it doesn't want to be read? Ross hesitated. Then reading it could be dangerous. For the next 2 nights, the 3 of them worked by torchlight. Ross noted patterns in the mirror reflection symbols. Cain followed the spiral pathway with his hands, feeling the grooves. Amay kept watch, though his eyes were often drawn to the shadows moving in the corners of the ruins. On the 3rd night, Ross stood back suddenly. I understand part of it." Cain leaned in. "What does it say?" Her lips tightened. "It's a warning. It says, do not open until the last star fades." Amay swallowed hard. "That sounds like a prophecy." Before Cain could respond, a deep rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. The torches flickered wildly, and the monolith's glow surged, brighter than ever before. And then, the voice returned. Louder this time. Clear. Cain froze. He didn't understand the words, but he felt them, deep in his chest, in his bones. Russ staggered back, pressing her hands to her ears. Amay dropped his torch, its flame hissing out on the sand. The glow faded as quickly as it had appeared. The valley went silent once more. Ross was the first to speak. Her voice was shaky. Whatever this is, it's not just history. It's something alive, and it's watching us. Cain stayed at the monolith, his jaw set. Then we keep going. If this is the birth of nations, I want to know who, or what, gave the first order. Far above them, unseen in the night sky, something shifted among the stars. The days in the valley grew longer, hotter, heavier. It wasn't just the desert heat, it was the feeling in the air, as if something unseen was watching every step. By the end of the first week, Cain had expanded his camp. More tents, more supplies, more people. 6 new workers arrived from Cairo, men Cain had used before on other digs. They were strong, loyal, and fearless. Also, he thought, the first sign of trouble came on the second night after their arrival. A man named Hassan was on watch duty, patrolling the edge of the ruins. He was a veteran of many expeditions, never afraid of desert nights. But when dawn came, his post was empty. Cain searched everywhere. The sand showed only one set of footprints, Hassan's, leading toward the monolith. And then, nothing. They just stopped, mid-stride, as if he had vanished into the air. The men grew restless. Whispers started spreading, about the humming in the night, the moving shadows, the feeling of eyes on their backs. One man swore he had seen a figure standing on top of the monolith, tall, thin, and glowing faintly. But when he looked again, it was gone. Russ tried to keep everyone calm. We don't know what happened. Maybe he got lost. Amir shook his head. No one gets lost that close to camp. Cain said nothing. But inside, he knew the truth. Hassan wasn't lost. He had been taken. The following evening, Cain ordered everyone to stay within sight of the firelight. The desert was silent, too silent. Not even the wind moved. Halfway through the night, the humming returned. This time, it was louder, and it came with a strange flickering light at the base of the monolith. Cain grabbed his rifle and stepped forward, Ross and Amir close behind. They saw Fahim, one of the new wakers, standing completely still before the stone. His eyes were open, but empty. His lips moved slowly, whispering words in the strange language carved on the stone. The symbols glowed brighter with each word. Fahim. Cain shouted. No response. Cain reached for him, but the moment he touched his shoulder, the light flared blindingly. A sudden rush of wind knocked him back. When Cain's vision cleared, Fahim was gone. Not a trace. Not a footprint. Not even disturbed sand. Russ stayed at the empty spot in shock. This is not natural. The rest of the workers were terrified. 2 more demanded to leave immediately. Cain let them go. He knew forcing them to stay would only make things worse. That night, only 6 people remained in camp. Cain, Amay, Ross, and 3 workers who refused to speak above a whisper. The next day, Cain tried to understand what was happening. He examined the carvings more closely. He noticed something he hadn't before. Tiny changes. The symbols were shifting. Not much, but enough to alter their meaning. Russ confirmed it. It's like it's talking to us, she said quietly, but in a language we can't fully understand yet. Amay's voice was barely above a whisper. Or maybe it's learning how to talk to us. That night, Cain made a decision. We keep working. Whatever this is, we're close to understanding it. And I won't stop until we do. But fate didn't give them much time. On the 7th night, the humming returned, louder than ever. The glow spread beyond the stone, casting light across the entire valley. Cain rushed outside to see all 3 remaining workers standing in a line before the monolith, their eyes empty like Fahim's, their lips moving in perfect unison. Russ screamed for them to stop. Amir tried to pull one away, but as soon as he touched him, the worker collapsed into the sand, turning to fine, gray dust that scattered in the wind. The other 2 stepped forward into the light and vanished. The valley went silent again. The glow faded. Only Cain, Ross, and Amir were left. Ross clutched her chest, breathing heavily. We're next, if we stay here. Cain stared at the monolith, his eyes hard. No, this is not the time to run. Whatever is inside that code, it's protecting itself, and I need to know why. Amir shook his head. So every person who gets too close disappears. Cain turned to him. Then I'll be the first to come back. Neither Amir nor Ross could tell if he was serious, or if the stone had already begun speaking to him. Far away, in the still desert night, a soft, inhuman whisper carried through the air, and the monolith pulsed once, like a heartbeat. The valley had never been so quiet. No wakers, no fires, just 3 people, and the stone. Cain sat alone, staring at the monolith under the pale moonlight. The golden emblem at its center shimmered faintly, like it was breathing. He hadn't slept in 2 nights. He didn't feel tired. In fact, he felt sharper, more awake, as if the stone itself was keeping him alive. Ross kept her distance, working in her tent by lamplight. Amir sat by the camp's edge, his eyes fixed on the dunes, listening for anything out of place. But the real danger, they both knew, was not in the sand. It was in the stone. At midnight, the humming returned. Softer this time, like a lullaby. Cain rose slowly, as if guided by something he couldn't resist. The cold night air wrapped around him, but the moment he stepped close to the monolith, warmth spread through his body. That's when he saw her again, the same woman from before, standing at the base of the stone. Long dark hair flowing down her back, a simple robe of white, glowing faintly under the moon. Her skin seemed to hold the same light as the golden emblem. Cain froze. "Who are you?" he whispered. She didn't turn. Instead, she placed her palm against the carvings, and the symbols lit up in a soft golden glow. Then she spoke, her voice smooth, almost melodic, but the words were in the same strange language carved into the stone. Cain stepped closer. "I can't understand you." Her head tilted slightly, and she glanced over her shoulder. Her eyes were not human. Deep, gold, and endless, like looking into the heart of the sun. Then, slowly, she switched to broken English. "Not your time to open." Cain's pulse quickened. "Why? What's inside?" The woman's gaze locked on his. "When the last star fades, the code will open. If you open before, your world will burn." Cain didn't move. "And if I'm willing to take that risk?" Her expression didn't change. "Then, you will not be the only one to pay." Before he could ask more, the humming grew louder. The woman stepped back into the light of the stone, and in a blink, she was gone. The glow faded. The carvings returned to their dull, lifeless form. Cain stood there in the dark, heart racing. He knew Ross and Amir wouldn't believe him, not without proof. But deep inside, he felt certain. He had just spoken to the guardian of the code. When he returned to camp, Ross was waiting, arms crossed. "Where were you?" Cain hesitated, observing something. Ross narrowed her eyes. "You're lying. Cain, this thing is dangerous. People are disappearing. It's not worth the risk." "It is worth it," he said sharply. "This stone, it's the key to something far greater than we've ever seen. And I'm not leaving until I know what it is." Amir stepped forward. "Sir, whatever this is, it's not meant for us. The warning is clear." But Cain's eyes were already drawn back to the monolith. Warnings are for people who fear the truth. That night, Cain made a decision. He would find a way to read the code, every last symbol. The Guardian's warning only convinced him more that the answers inside were worth any cost. 3 nights later, the chance came. A fierce desert wind swept through the valley, rattling tents and scattering loose supplies. Ross and Amir were busy securing the camp. Cain slipped away, carrying the old diary he had found in Cairo, the one written by a traveler who claimed to have seen the stone of the first gods. Cain stood at the base of the monolith, holding the diary in one hand, tracing the carvings with the other. Lightning flickered far in the distance, casting quick flashes across the valley. The diary's ink was faded, the language old, but Cain had studied it for weeks. It contained a partial translation, a set of matching symbols, with rough meanings. Slowly, carefully, Cain began to match the diary's words to the carvings. The stone responded. The glow returned, brighter with each line he traced. The humming deepened, vibrating through his bones. Kane's breath quickened. He was close, so close. Kane. Russ's voice cut through the wind. She and Amay were running toward him, shouting over the roar. But Kane didn't stop. He reached the final line in the diary and pressed his palm against the golden emblem. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, a blast of golden light erupted from the stone, shooting upward into the sky. The carvings blazed so brightly they burned into Kane's vision. The air was filled with thousands of whispering voices. Russ and Amay shielded their eyes, screaming his name. And just before the light swallowed him whole, Kane smiled. The blast of light faded, and Kane found himself on his knees in the sand, gasping for air. The monolith still glowed faintly, the carvings shifting in slow, hypnotic patterns. Russ knelt beside him, gripping his shoulders. Kane, what did you do? He smiled faintly. I spoke to it. It listened. Amay's eyes were wide. No, it used you. But Kane wasn't listening. His gaze was locked on the stone, his mind still echoing with the whispers. They hadn't been random. They had been words. Words he now understood. That night, he opened the diary again, filling in the missing translations with what the stone had given him. The sentences formed slowly, but each one was clearer than the last. It wasn't just a message. It was an instruction. The first line read, "When the golden eye is awakened, the earth will shift to reveal the path." Kane traced the carving of the golden emblem with his finger. "The path," he murmured. The next night, the air in the valley changed. The wind stopped. The temperature dropped sharply. The sand under their tents trembled with a faint vibration. Amir ran to Kane's tent. "Say, something's happening to the ground." They stepped outside. Under the cold moonlight, the sand around the monolith began to sink. Slowly, silently, a circular trench formed around it, as if the earth itself was lowering to reveal something buried deep. Russ whispered, "It's moving." The trench widened, and beneath the sand, dark stone steps appeared, spiraling downward into the earth. Kane's pulse raced. The path. But Russ grabbed his arm. "No, Kane, we don't know what's down there." "That's exactly why we have to go," he replied. Before she could stop him, Kane took a torch and began to descend the steps. Amay followed reluctantly, Russ trailing behind. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. The sound of their footsteps echoed strangely, as if they were no longer in solid rock, but inside something hollow. After what felt like minutes, they reached a wide underground chamber. The walls were covered in the same glowing symbols, brighter here than on the monolith above. In the center stood another stone, smaller, but covered entirely in carvings. Kane approached it slowly. The symbols shifted under his gaze, rearranging themselves to form words he could now read without the diary. Russ's voice shook. "Kane, what does it say?" His eyes scanned the lines. "It says, 'The first throne awaits. The one who finishes the code will command the blood of nations.'" Amay stepped back. "That's not a translation. That's a threat." Before Kane could reply, the chamber filled with a sudden gust of air, cold, heavy, carrying with it the faint scent of burning metal. The torches flickered, and in the dim light, they saw them. Figures, tall, robed, and standing in the shadows at the far end of the chamber. Their faces were hidden beneath golden masks shaped like the emblem. Russ gasped, "We're not alone." The figures didn't move. They simply stood there, watching. Kane stepped forward cautiously. "Who are you?" No answer. Instead, one of them raised a hand and pointed at the smaller stone. The symbols began to glow brighter, the air vibrating with the deep hum they had heard so many nights before. Kane felt his chest tighten. He knew what they wanted. He was supposed to read it. Russ grabbed his arm again. "Kane, don't." But he looked at her with a strange calm. "This is what I came here for." He began to read. The moment the last word left his lips, the chamber shook violently. The walls pulsed with light, and a beam shot upward through the ceiling, straight through the monolith above. Outside, in the desert, the sky erupted with swirling golden patterns, forming the same symbols in the air. Amir shouted over the noise, "Kane, stop! The whole place is waking up." But Kane kept reading, his voice blending with the deep hum until it was impossible to tell them apart. The robed figures vanished like smoke. The walls began to crack. The floor split open beneath their feet, revealing a black void below. Ross grabbed Kane and pulled him back. "We have to go now." The three of them ran up the stone steps, the ground shaking under every step. Sand poured in from above as the trench collapsed. They burst out into the open air just as the monolith gave a deep, echoing groan, like stone grinding against stone. The glow dimmed. The humming stopped. The desert went still again. Kane stood, breathing hard, staring at the monolith. "It's only the first part. There's more." Ross turned on him, furious. "More? Kane, you almost killed us. You have no idea what you're playing with." But Kane's eyes were locked on the carvings. "I know exactly what I'm playing with, and I'm not finished." Far above them, high in the night sky, one of the golden symbols still shimmered among the stars, refusing to fade. For 2 days, the valley was silent. The sand lay undisturbed, the wind never rose, and the monolith stood cold and still. Ross thought it was over. Amir hoped it was over. But Kane knew better. Every night, he sat by the stone, watching the carvings. At first, they stayed still. But slowly, subtly, they began to shift again. The golden emblem glowed faintly now, pulsing once every few minutes, like a heartbeat. Each pulse seemed stronger than the last. Kane took it as a sign. The code wasn't finished. On the third night, Kane called Ross and Amir to the stone. His face was pale but determined. "It's ready," he said quietly. Ross crossed her arms. "No, we are leaving. Tonight, before it wakes up again." But Kane shook his head. "This is our only chance. Once the code completes itself, it may never open again in our lifetime." Amir stepped forward. "Say, every time you read from it, something worse happens. People vanish. The ground splits. The sky changes. How far are you willing to go?" Kane looked up at the towering monolith. "All the way." Russ's voice rose. "And if that means destroying everything?" Kane's eyes didn't waver. "Then we'll know the truth before it happens." That night, as the moon reached its highest point, the monolith came alive. The carvings lit up all at once, flooding the valley in golden light. The air vibrated with a low, thunder-like hum. The golden emblem glowed so bright it cast shadows miles away. Kane stepped forward, diary in hand. He didn't need it anymore. He could read the symbols as easily as his own name. The whispers filled his mind, guiding his voice. Ross grabbed his arm one last time. "Kane, please, don't." He pulled away. "It's already begun." And then, he began to read. The symbols responded instantly. The glow surged, wrapping around him like threads of fire. The hum deepened into a roar. Above, the stars began to move, shifting into the shapes of the carvings, forming a massive ring in the sky. Ross and Amir shielded their eyes. The light was almost blinding. The wind rose, swirling sand into a furious storm around the stone. Kane's voice grew louder, stronger, as if he wasn't speaking alone anymore. Another voice, deep, ancient, and inhuman, echoed his words, matching him syllable for syllable. The final lines burned themselves into his mind. "When the last word is spoken, the first throne will awaken, and the nations will bow." The moment he spoke the last word, everything stopped. No wind, no sound. The valley hung in absolute stillness. And then, the ground exploded upward, throwing Ross and Amir to the sand. From beneath the monolith, massive stone slabs rose, forming a staircase that spiraled into the sky. Each step was engraved with glowing symbols, and each glowed brighter as they ascended into the air. The golden emblem detached from the monolith, floating into Kane's hands. The heat was intense, but he didn't flinch. Ross staggered to her feet, shouting over the roar. "Kane, drop it. It's not yours." But Kane didn't hear her. His eyes were locked upward, where the staircase seemed to lead, into a black, swirling vortex in the sky. The hum returned, louder than ever. The symbols above them pulsed like living stars. Amir pulled at Russ's arm. "We have to get him out of here." They rushed forward, but as soon as they stepped onto the staircase, an invisible force shoved them back. Kane, however, walked upward without resistance, the golden emblem glowing brighter with every step. Russ screamed his name, but he didn't turn. By the time he reached the 10th step, the vortex above flared with light. Golden tendrils reached down, wrapping around him like chains. Cain raised the emblem high above his head, and the tendrils pulled him upward, vanishing into the vortex. The staircase crumbled behind him, falling into the desert with a deafening crash. The vortex snapped shut, and the sky returned to its normal, starry calm. The monolith stood silent once more. Its glow was gone. Ross and Amay stood in the ruins of the valley, breathing hard. "He's gone," Amay said quietly. Ross shook her head. "No, he's not gone. He's where the code wanted him to be." Far above, one single golden symbol shimmered faintly in the night sky, before fading into black. For a long time, Ross and Amay didn't move. The desert wind had returned, soft, steady, as if nothing had happened. The monolith stood cold and lifeless before them. No glow, no hum, no movement. The golden emblem was gone. So was Cain. Ross finally took a step forward, placing her hand on the stone. It felt like ordinary rock now. No warmth, no energy, just silence. Amay's voice was low. "Do you think he's dead?" Ross shook her head slowly. "No, I think he's somewhere else." They broke camp the next morning. Neither spoke much. The valley felt emptier than before, as if something vital had been taken from it. The locals in the nearest village refused to let them speak of what happened. One old man simply said, "Some doors should stay closed." Weeks later, Russ returned to Cairo, trying to put the events behind her. She told the museum she'd found nothing worth keeping. Officially, the expedition was a failure. But in private, she couldn't stop thinking about the moment Cain vanished, the look on his face, the way the sky had changed. One night, while going through her notes, she noticed something strange. On a page where she had absent-mindedly sketched the monolith months earlier, new markings had appeared. They were faint, almost invisible, but under the lamplight, she saw they were glowing ever so slightly. Her hands trembled as she traced them. She didn't understand the meaning, but she recognized the shapes. They were from the code, and at the bottom, a line in English. "The first throne is not empty." Ross dropped the page. The glow faded instantly. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, in a place that was not on any map, Cain stood in a vast hall. Its ceiling stretched so high it vanished into darkness. The walls were carved with the same shifting symbols, glowing brighter here than anywhere he had seen. Before him, on a raised platform, stood a throne made of black stone and gold, massive, imposing, and empty. From the shadows, figures emerged, tall, robed, masked in gold. They moved silently, surrounding him. One stepped forward and spoke, in perfect English. "You have finished the code. You are the chosen speaker." Cain's eyes darted between them. "Speaker of what?" The figure tilted its head. Not of what, but of who. The ground beneath the throne split open, and from it, a deep, rumbling voice filled the hall. It wasn't human. It wasn't even alive in the way Cain understood. But it knew his name. "Cain," it said slowly, "we have waited for you." Back in Cairo, Russ stared out her apartment window at the night sky. For weeks, the stars had been the same. But tonight, one of them flickered faintly, then began to pulse, golden and steady. She whispered to herself, "He's still out there." She didn't know if that was a comfort or a warning. The story could have ended there. But the truth is, the monolith still stands in the desert, buried again under sand and secrecy. Governments deny its existence. Historians refuse to speak of it. And yet, on certain nights, when the air is still, locals say they can hear a faint hum under the ground, as if something or someone is still reading the code. That's how it ends. But the question remains, did Cain uncover the birth of a nation? Or did he awaken the one who will end it?